Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Jim Boomer. Hi, Jim. Thanks for being on this episode.
You bet. Good to see you, John.
Absolutely. Now, Jim is our CEO, and usually I'm the one asking the questions and Jim is the one answering. But this episode, we have a topic on 5 core components of your social media strategy. And Jim, you let me know you had some questions prepared for me, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. I know you've been an integral part of our strategy around social media at Boomer, between you and Heather. And so I thought this would be better for me to ask the questions this time. So here we go. My first question is, really, why is it important that firms really rethink and refresh their social media strategy?
Yeah. So, obviously social media has been around for a while. This is not a new topic. And Jim, I remember it was about 12 years ago when you and I actually gave a joint presentation to a client on social media. And this was when firms were just starting to figure out what exactly is social media. Should they let their staff log into social media during work? All those questions. And now you fast forward 12 years, and in a lot of ways, we're still having a lot of the similar conversations. And it's not necessarily because the profession is behind the times or really hasn't fully embraced social media, though I do think it's part of it. I also think that the transformation the profession is going through, especially rapidly moving to advisory and consulting services, that it's making us rethink how we leverage social media, how we consider it, whether it's working or not, and where to best focus our resources. So while it's not a new topic, it has a new lens in which a lot of firms are looking at it.
Great point. And I would add, I think, the world we live in, it's one of those forces you can't ignore anymore. If you rewind back to that presentation we did, it was still, coming on the scene. And I think it was a lot easier, and it was frankly probably okay that when people put their head in the sand, and you can't do it anymore. So you got to get a little more serious. So if for our listeners, if they say, okay, John, I hear you, we need to either create a strategy, or if we have one, we need to refresh it. But what are some tips and some solutions? What would you recommend they do to help improve their social media strategy?
Yeah. And as the title kind of shows, we have 5 kind of core components that, we can walk through. But one thing I want to highlight before we dive into that is that these 5 core components are going to be relevant to whether you're looking to reach prospects or clients through your social media efforts. And they're going to be relevant if you're looking to reach new talent out there. Right. So one big topic, and I've had several conversations with clients this week, and everyone is talking about this, and that is attracting more talent. And Jim, to your point about not being able to ignore it, especially when it comes to representing your company to potential new hires or getting people to apply to become interested in your firm, these 5 core components we're going to walk through really are relevant for both audiences. So the first core component I want to highlight is all around messaging. Social media is simply channels in which you can leverage to communicate with an audience. And before you start using those channels to communicate, you have to really think about what is our core messaging that we really want to use as we start to reach out via social media. And so I want to give you a resource, because we don't have time on this episode to really dive into it, but I would really recommend all of our listeners either listen to or read a book called Building a Story Brand. It is a messaging framework here. We started using probably close to 4 years ago. And Jim, I actually think you were the one to originally bring that back to Boomer from another meeting you attended. And we started to look into it and realize, wow, this is a framework we really need to use. But it's a framework that really helps you clarify your message. And so we started to use that internally here at Boomer. And then we started getting clients asking us, saying, can you do something similar for us? So I would read that book, Building a Story Brand, or maybe look some videos up on YouTube that kind of break it down. But it's a really powerful framework we use internally at Boomer, and we now use as we work with clients. But it just really helps you clarify your message and make sure that what you're communicating is on brand and consistent. All right. So if that was the first component, the second component is all about content creation. So even 12 years ago, Jim, when you and I were doing that joint presentation, one thing we highlighted, I remember, is the backbone of your social media strategy is your content strategy. If you do not have content in which you can promote or post or share via social media, your strategy is going to dry up pretty quick. Okay. And that's what we see a lot of firms struggling with. But a couple of things I just want to highlight around content with all this talk about outsourcing in the profession. And we just hosted an outsourcing, workshop not too long ago. A lot of the focus is put on, or is kind of put in the tax area or the audit area. And while those are certainly great areas for outsourcing, another great area for outsourcing is in the area of marketing or content creation. Someone that is a professional writer that maybe lives outside of your firm that can work collaboratively with you to help you create a consistent, high quality content engine. And this includes things like not just articles and blog posts, while those are important, things like white papers and guides, and even getting into writing social media posts as well. And so if you are sitting there struggling with your social media strategy, I would first have you ask yourself, are you struggling with your content strategy? And how can you kind of break down some of those barriers that have most likely been present in your firm in terms of how, in terms of preventing you of getting great content out? How can you use outside resources to make that much more efficient? Jim, I'll stop there for a second because you've been a part of us leveraging the whole story brand process as it pertains to our messaging, and you've been a key part in helping us develop a content engine for our company. Anything you would add to those first two components?
Well, and I guess tying it back to that early presentation and those early days, a lot of people came out of the gate posting about their team happy hour, or, here's what we had for our delicious lunch. And frankly, that's gonna, as you said, that's gonna lose steam real quick. People have evolved. They want you to be offering something of value. And that's going to come through that content. So it all kind of works hand in hand. But you're so right. Like, you got to give them a reason to come back.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, great. So the first core component's messaging. Second is content. The third is channels. Okay. So social media can be pretty overwhelming in terms of if you're sitting there as a firm owner, or as a partner, or as a marketing leader, and you're thinking, okay, we really need to improve what we're doing on social media, but it's so overwhelming because there's so many different channels. We got LinkedIn, we got Facebook, we got Twitter, we have, we have Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of this, and they're not all created equal. And I don't know any firms that are using TikTok, though I am getting asked about that more frequently now.
I don't think it'll be long.
No, I don't think it will be long. And, really, my advice to you is don't get overwhelmed by all the channels. Just pick one channel to start and just focus on that channel and get consistent on that channel and learn. And you can always branch out to another channel. Where we see most firms experiencing success when they're reaching out to prospects or current clients is using LinkedIn. It's just kind of the number one spot that makes kind of the most sense for those for the business content to be promoted and shared and for engagement to happen. The other area where we see firms having the most success when kind of reaching out to talent is actually Instagram. Now, as most of you know, Instagram is owned by Facebook, and Facebook is still the largest social network. So we encourage you to have a presence on there, especially from a talent perspective. But it real quickly looks archaic if your company does not have a presence on Instagram, because that's where, especially most of that younger generation coming out of college into the workforce, that's where they go to learn about your company. So if they type in your firm name and nothing comes up, it kind of gives them a feeling of irrelevance, out there. So third one's channels. That's my advice there. And then the fourth core component are the tools. There are so many tools out there that can really make your life a lot easier. And the social media tools, they obviously are tools that are created outside the accounting profession, but we can bring them into our firm and use them. And these tools have been around for a while. And one of the biggest selling points early on was, hey, you can manage multiple accounts on one platform, right? So if someone's managing all the accounts for Boomer Consulting on one platform, they can create post, schedule post, things of that sort. And while that function is still there and still extremely, helpful, there's more functions than ever that can make your life much easier. One of the most popular ones right now is a artificial intelligence function that you post one article in the platform, you write one short posting about it, you click a button, and then the tool generates 5 more postings around that same article. So it's a way for you to get more mileage out of your content and share it on different platforms, share it with different social media posts, but it's still using that same piece of content. So a lot of these tools are getting smarter and making it easier for you to get just the most that you can out of the content that you create. And so number 1's messaging, 2's content, 3's channels, 4's tools. Number 5 is scheduling. Okay. And so it can be really taxing to every day in your social media strategy, feeling like you have to wake up, log into all these social platforms and post something and do that multiple times a day, every day. So how firms are getting around that is they're setting a set time throughout the week where they schedule out the post for the entire week. And depending on which platform you use and things of that sort, it will give you recommendations on, hey, this post will most likely, perform best on Instagram at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, right? That's how it can kind of really accelerate your progress there, and putting your arms around the scheduling process to ensure that it doesn't just turn into something that you feel like you're doing every day, all day. So those are the 5 core components of your social media strategy.
I love the way you broke it down. And, I'd emphasize that last one. Having a schedule is important, and consistency, and because it's an uphill climb to attract your audience in social media. And it can take time, but it can be pretty quick like that. If they come and there's nothing there for them, that you can lose them really quick. So keeping that consistency is important. But again, I love how you break it down into the 5 core components. So my next question is, if a firm really focuses on these five core components, and builds a strategy around it, what kind of results can they anticipate?
Yeah, I think well, I know what, we see with firms that follow these 5 core components is their content gets read a lot more. they because we all know what it's like to spend a lot of time writing an article or something and putting it out there, and maybe being a little bit disappointed with the results, or maybe not even knowing are people reading this or not. But if you follow these 5 core components, your content will get read a lot more. It will get shared. You'll have more people talking about it. You should expect kind of more thought leadership recognition in your areas that you're looking to develop that thought leadership in. And really, you will just overall have a stronger presence online. And from a talent perspective, you will see an increase in people applying for roles in your company or inquiring about roles, because most individuals don't go to your website first. They go to social media channels to find out about you. And so you'll see an increase in that area as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a reason every major company is investing heavily in this strategy and in these tactics, because it must work. So great results to be anticipated. So my last question is, we've heard a lot of great stuff. We've talked a lot about some ways that people can up their game in social media. But what would be the next step that you would recommend someone that's listening to us take?
Yeah, absolutely. And I presented on this topic last month at a conference, and I got a similar question. And actually, what I would recommend is, especially if you haven't touched your social media in a while, you maybe haven't given it a fresh look, is do a real brief social media audit where you just take a look saying, okay, where do we have accounts made? Where do we have maybe pages set up on social media channels that are outdated or haven't been um, touched in a while? And just kind of get a kind of a current state assessment of your social media presence, and then identify based off your audience who you're looking to reach and things of that sort, and maybe where you've seen the best past performance. Start with just selecting one social media channel and say, hey, over the next month, we're going to consistently, you use that word, Jim, consistently focus on our social media strategy on this channel, and then branch that out to another channel. I would just really kind of recommend getting that momentum before you start branching out to other social media channels.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, John. This has been great. I've enjoyed being on the other side of the interview here. So
Yeah.
And great advice as always, and a pleasure to chat with you.
Yes, I must confess, I think it's easier asking the questions than it is answering. So, but it's good for me as the interviewer on most episodes to kind of know how challenging it can be to be the one answering the questions. But for those listeners, if you like these topics, you like what we're talking about here, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning, and every episode kind of focuses on a different topic that is critical and relevant to your firm. So we would really recommend and ask that you subscribe to the podcast. So Jim, as always, it's a pleasure. So thank you for joining this episode, and thanks to our listeners.